I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. The historic events over the weekend. And on a personal note, it's, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, it's, and I think, look, it's, at some level as an American, it's like hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that's why a lot of people like the guy.
Donald Trump is threatening Meta's Mark Zuckerberg with jail time. The former president took to Truth Social to urge Republicans to pass the SAVE Act, a bill that would mandate proof of citizenship when registering to vote. Trump then said, quote, "Our whole voting system is under siege. All I can say is that if I'm elected president, we will pursue election fraudsters at levels never seen before, and they will be sent to prison for long periods of time. We already know who you are. Don't do it, Zuckerbucks. Be careful." For context, the feud between Trump and Zuckerberg dates back to Trump's presidency. Trump was ultimately banned on the platform following the January 6th attack. The ban was lifted in January of 2023. Still, Trump's comments against Meta have increasingly gotten harsher. He referred to the social media company as, quote, "the enemy of the people" back in March, and in February, Trump called for Zuckerberg to be prosecuted.
In other Meta news, the company has updated its hate speech policies toward posts attacking Zionists on both Facebook and Instagram. Meta said, quote, "Going forward, we will remove content attacking Zionists when it is not explicitly about the political movement, but instead uses anti-Semitic stereotypes or threatens other types of harm through intimidation or violence directed against Jews or Israelis under the guise of attacking Zionists." So Trump hates Mark Zuckerberg.
Hates him.
And actually, these Zuckerbucks thing isn't even about him being banned from Facebook. It's about a grant that Mark Zuckerberg and his wife made to election-related nonprofits that Trump and his MAGA people have said has something to do with Trump losing the election, or
during COVID there was the
getting out the vote for people who are not going to vote for Trump.
Look, I think the more that Trump tweets, or Truth Social, whatever you want to call it, this is good for Biden. This is good for Democrats. Like, this is the distraction that they need. He's been really disciplined over the last week or so, and not done a lot of or at least not gotten the focus of the press in terms of attacking people. The more he puts the onus back on retribution and back on the enemy of the people, kind of that language, that rhetoric, the more he reminds voters about what his first term looked like. And I think that's really something that his team is going to want to quiet down.
So look, I don't think going after Mark Zuckerberg is very productive. No. I actually really hate the blame everything that goes wrong is Facebook's fault kind of approach to governance that both of our parties have taken, because it does go both ways. Donald Trump is far from the first political figure to rail against Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. Joe Biden accused Mark Zuckerberg of killing people by not taking enough contrarian COVID information off the platform. And after Trump won the election in 2016, we had to endure like 3 years from every major mainstream progressive media person saying Donald Trump won the election because Mark Zuckerberg, because of what he did on Facebook, that he was compromised by Russia, that all the Russiagate stuff, the bots and everything on Facebook, all of those claims ended up being wildly exaggerated by a media class that didn't understand the platform very well. I think it was all very silly. I think this similarly is silly for Trump to blame his 2020 loss on Mark Zuckerberg. But again, both sides do this. Everything that has gone wrong in those two elections was attributed to Mark Zuckerberg. I end up feeling like I have no special for the guy.
Yeah, I feel like you got a little defensive for Zuckerberg.
Well, it's just ridiculous when somebody is being attacked. And I watched him being, when he was dragged into those hearings, and that Jack Dorsey was in those too, and the head of Google and other tech CEOs, and then they just get screamed at incoherently by elderly members of our government
with
who
no
don't
idea.
Understand technology at all. Like, what's his face? Another very old Democrat. There's so many. One starts to forget who's who. Had it like a printed out on a piece of cardboard, like screenshots from a hateful or a fake
the performance
Russian
theater.
Facebook group, being like, why didn't you take this down, Mark? He's like, what?
Watching the staffers behind the members of Congress, trying to explain to them what they're talking about or calling it the Facebook. Like, I think that's where you really start to show like how out of touch politicians are.
Exactly.
In technology, especially social media, has been kind of the scapegoat, but also the boon for both parties. You know, Democrats loved social media during the Obama campaign because it's really kind of one of the avenues they used to lift up his candidacy. But under Donald Trump, it became easy to justify the argument that, you know, Russia and collusion was being used through social media to amplify Trump. It's what Republicans, Democrats love and hate all at the same time, depending on who it's benefiting.
So what is the argument for not passing the SAVE Act, which Democrats oppose? The SAVE Act is to, at the federal level, require proof of citizenship to vote. I accept and agree that illegal immigrants are not voting in some large numbers, and it's kind of a conservative, made-up thing. But what if we double and triple check that people who are voting are citizens? Is something so wrong with that?
So there's nothing wrong with the fact that we're checking, but it's something we're already doing. So now we want to allocate more funds to do something we're already doing. The idea that undocumented immigrants are illegally voting is false, and that narrative is just being used to kind of drum up more fear around immigration and things like that. But there is an argument, which I think is logical, that people who are living, let's use DC for an example. If you're living in DC, and yes, you may be undocumented, but you need to be able to have a voice in how funds are allocated in the city you live in, whether or not you're here legally or not. It's why in the census, we count people who are undocumented because they still use the funds, they still use the resources of that city. So I actually don't have a problem with undocumented people voting in state and municipality elections, but they're not voting in federal elections. They don't have the ability to, and it would be a crime for them to do so and open them up to even more issues. And so I think it's just, this is kind of where Democrats kind of find themselves in trouble in the messaging wars, because they lose the messaging war of undocumented people shouldn't be voting in elections because of this kind of stuff.
I would also go after Republicans a little bit here. While it's just a terrible idea and a non-starter to allow illegal immigrants to be voting in any context, it is true at the local level. You want more, again, I make this argument to Republicans all the time. You want people who are concerned about the community, crime, and want more resources put not toward woke nonsense, but toward like actually making the city more livable. You would want the immigrants voting. It's progressive white people who vote for wokeness and DEI and liberal excess and wanted to fund the police. It's not the immigrants.
I say all the time, if you want to know who's more a danger to, immigrant and minority communities, it's just Jim Jordan may be a threat, but like it's also the suburban white family who loves black people until they move into their neighborhood or go to their private school. Like they're just as dangerous. And so I always think about Puerto Rico. Republicans for a long time have been pushing back against Puerto Rico becoming a state. But when you actually look at the polling, Puerto Rico would be a Republican state if it was added.
It's like we talked about earlier, the cab driver, the immigrant cab driver, doesn't want more illegal immigration.
No.
And is worried about crime.
They are. And tired of feeling like they have to think about every word they say, everything that they say, and that they're going to offend someone.